You're listening to Sirens, a true crime podcast, brought to you by the Sirens Network. This podcast contains explicit content, so listener discretion is advised. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely the views of the hosts and do not reflect the views of affiliates, associates, or sponsors of this podcast. This is Sirens, a true crime podcast.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about William Boudrie and his ex-wife, Judie Hansen. This is an Ada case, and this case actually went cold for 29 years. William Boudrie's murder, and if this says anything, it's because it happened in 1980, and our wonderful, colorful cast of characters from Ada police and prosecution and OSBI, they were all there. So we're talking OSBI agent Gary Rogers was on this case, which you have heard his name plenty of times before. Peterson, I believe, was in charge when they were doing investigations and it ran cold, and eventually Chris Ross is the one that prosecuted it. But so let's tell you a little bit about what happened. Let's start with March 1980. And we're going to hone in on this little small town of Pickett, Oklahoma. Former OSBI agent Gary Rogers, who was obviously active at the time, found William Boudrie's body near the Wilson community on April 28th, 1980. There was a Vanoss student teacher leading a class on a field trip. So they discovered William Boudrie's badly decomposed body, and then they called it authorities. Rogers said when he arrived, items were discovered on his body, including a gold ring with the initials WDB. They found that he had been shot in the head with two .22 caliber hollow point bullets. They determined that it was probably daytime when Boudrie had been killed because he still had sunglasses on his face when they found him. They also determined, because he was pretty badly decomposed, that he'd been out there for at least several weeks when he was finally found. They sent off dental records to the medical examiner's office in Oklahoma City and confirmed that it was William Boudrie. And then they sent off the bullets found to a man named Tom Jordan, who was the OSBI deputy director at the time. And he examined them, and he said that he thought that they were .22 caliber long rifle high velocity rounds. Apparently, whoever did this had hid his body under a weathered piece of sheet metal. They started looking into, like you do, the people around Boudrie. They went and questioned he had a girlfriend at the time. He had a couple of kids. He had an ex-wife. So they went and started digging into his past. They found that he had divorced a woman named Judie Hansen in 1979, but for some reason, because this was 1980, it was a year later, they were still living together. And apparently they had a volatile relationship. Not only were they living together, but he was also dating someone else. He was actually dating a woman named Betty Noble at the time. Betty Noble eventually told him that she was dating Boudrie at the time of his death. She said she was at his house in 1980 when his ex-wife, Judie Hansen, called. And she said one evening she was at her house, she overheard a comment where she heard Boudrie say over the phone, "I found what I want." Noble testified that during that call, Hansen had told Boudrie that she would kill him before she would ever give him up. And that was actually the last time that Betty Noble would see her boyfriend alive. So Judie Hansen told Gary Rogers that on Saturday, March 8th, 1980, she and Boudrie, and this would be about a month before he was found, she and Boudrie visited friends in Stratford, then went shopping in Oklahoma City. And after returning to Pontotoc County, they visited the Coachlight Club that they hung out there for a while. Eventually, after they closed, they went home. She said that they returned to their home, and then apparently when they got home, after being out at the bar all night, Boudrie was just like, "Oh, you know what? I'm out, and packed his bags and said that he was leaving. Didn't tell her where he was going or what he was doing, according to her. And then she said that she told Rogers that she had never saw him after that.
They didn't get into a fight or anything. A man just up and leaves when he's drunk.
District Attorney Chris Ross said during the original investigation that Hansen had told officials that she had purchased a .22 caliber handgun from a pawn shop on West Main in Ada, though investigators have an official record of the transaction from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. That was it. They were done. Jump to 28 years later because this case went cold for 28 years. So in August 2007, Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Gary Perkinson reopened the case into Boudrie's murder after receiving some new information.
I had never heard of this homicide with William Boudrie at that time. When I got this information, and I'm just going to tell you the truth, when I got this information, I immediately thought 1980s homicide, Pontotoc County, and I didn't want to be accused by anybody that I was feeding anybody information or anything. So I asked my inspector if I could go to Idaho to talk to this person and get their side of the story, get what happened, do an interview with them, and then come back and look at the case file. So they let me do that. And I did that because I didn't want to have to say, yes, I did look at the case file. So then I would have been familiar with the information in it and would have had the opportunity to be accused of that.
This new information came from who, you might ask? Well, it came from David Lee Vaught, who was married to Judie's sister, Aletha. David reportedly confessed to a friend in 2007 that he knew who murdered Boudrie. So he reportedly told his friend that Judie Hansen, had called him and his wife, which was Judie's sister, and confessed to them.
I went up there and got the information, came back and looked at it, and it was a match. I mean, it was. And so that's what I thought, okay, he's either involved in this homicide or he's telling the truth.
When this friend turned in this information to OSBI, they went to David Vaught, and he was basically telling on his ex-wife now that it was like a fresh divorce. She was like really like overbearing and really jealous and like all this stuff.
Basically, at that point, after I interviewed him, I took a look at the case file that was in the Callister. I didn't have it in Ada. Took a look at it, and when I spoke to Dave Vaught, he told me that Judie had called him like 3 times in one day, and which was, according to him, was really unusual. So as I'm looking through the case file, I did end up finding the phone records that were obtained back then, and I found we're in March. There hadn't been any phone calls between them, but on I think it was March 8th, somewhere in there, there were 3 phone calls back to back to back. He told me that at some point in 1980, I can't remember, it was, I believe he said around the springtime, something like that. But he said that Judie had called him and her sister, Aletha. They spoke a total of about 3 times, at one point in that day. He said they rarely talked before that at all.
Tell me what you heard Judie say. What did she say to you or whatever? And he said, and I quote, she said, "I just killed Boudrie. Can you bring the pickup to Oklahoma and help me move the body to Wyoming?"
I think it's actually Idaho. They were in the lower part of Idaho when this happened. Wyoming, yeah. Yeah, so they didn't live in Wyoming. They were in Idaho. She calls them and says something like, "I killed William. I need you to come down here and take the body back."
He told her, well, if that's true, if you really did just kill somebody, then you need to probably just go turn yourself in. So David Vaught said Hansen told him that because they asked him, they're like, well, did she tell you how she killed him? Judie Hansen told David that she lured William Boudrie to the woods by telling him that if he went out to the woods with her, she would have sex with him in the middle of the field. While they were walking in the woods, Hansen was walking behind Boudrie and shot him in the back of the head.
But she said she killed William and put him under some, I believe she said some, he said some, I think some limbs and pieces of tin, or wood and pieces of tin.
She told David and Aletha that she then threw the gun off of some random bridge on her way back to town and disposed of some gloves in a dumpster behind a business in town, and that was that. So Special Agent Gary Perkinson devised a plan to get Judie and her sister talking about the murder. So David Bott not only testified to that later, but he actually helped authorities uncover evidence to use against Hansen by making phone calls to his ex-wife and Judie. The first call he initially had, he called her under the guise of, "Hey, I just wanted to warn you that this murder case for Boudrie is being reopened by the OSBI."
I believe I went back to Idaho and had him make a recorded phone call. And this is with the help of the Idaho State Police, to his soon-to-be ex-wife, Aletha. She said, he basically, during the recorded call, he says, "Hey, the OSBI just called me about, and they know about William's murder, and they want to talk to me. They want to talk to you too. They're going to want to talk to you too." And she said something to the effect of, I have nothing to say to them.
And along with recordings of those conversations, they placed a wiretap on Hansen's telephone. They started just recording, like, as much as they could to try to get something about this murder from them. Agent Perkinson said it became obvious by their conversations that Aletha knew about the murder, because at one point she was actually recorded saying, and I quote, "That motherfucker got what he deserved. That's what I'll tell you, and that's what I'm going to say."
And said something to the effect of, "That son of a bitch deserved everything he got, I'll tell you that." Yes, I asked him that, and it was because they were going to be getting a divorce, so he had no reason to continue to keep the secret. Oh, it stayed with him, but he did keep it, but he didn't see a reason to continue to keep it after they were going to be getting a divorce.
In those recorded conversations, eventually they submitted those conversations to a grand jury along with testimony. It was those recorded conversations that convinced eventually both a state grand jury to issue an indictment for, guess who? Judie Hansen.
She actually turned herself in with her attorney at the courthouse. And then I walked her over to be fingerprinted and photographed. We did make several attempts to try to find the firearm, but weren't able to. We were able to find where a firearm was purchased on I believe on Valentine's Day, 1980. From a personal point of view regarding this case and the logistics of wiretaps, they're extremely labor intensive, and there's no way I could have done that without the assistance of the District 22 Drug Task Force, OBN, the Chickasaw Nation Whitehorse Police Department. All of them helped in one way or another with that.
It took the grand jury 18 months. They got their indictment on Judie Hansen. Eventually, when she had her trial, they straight up found her guilty. Chris Ross said they were damning those recordings. It was obvious to everyone Judie Hansen had murdered William Boudrie, and for 29 years, she and her sister had been sharing this secret. A multi-county grand jury in Oklahoma indicted Aletha that same year on one count of perjury, and that's it. But they said that they did that because she lied to the grand jury about the phone calls when they called her in to testify about them, like in Judie Hansen's case. So the details that came to light during the trial of Judie Hansen. So Betty Noble, who was Boudrie's girlfriend at the time, had a relationship with him. She was asked if she knew that Boudrie was actually living with Hansen at the time. She said, "He told me that they had a living, quote unquote, arrangement." She went on to testify that shortly after his death, Boudrie had invited her and her little boy over to his trailer where he was living during the week while he worked. She said that she overheard him having that heated conversation with someone on the phone where he said, "I found what I wanted." She said that she assumed that he was speaking with Judie, and that he was basically telling her, like, this is it. We're done for good because I'm with Betty now, and she's what I've wanted the whole time. Apparently that upset Judie. Boudrie told Noble that the phone conversation was with his ex-wife, and that his ex-wife told him right then and there that she would literally kill him before she'd give him up to anyone else. William Boudrie had a daughter named Sheila Hazlett, who was 15 years old. I'm sorry, a stepdaughter, who was 15 when her stepfather was found dead. When Boudrie disappeared, she had said that her mother was, like, really depressed, wouldn't talk to anybody, and that when she asked her about it, she said that Boudrie had left her for good. Michelle Boudrie, who was William Boudrie's daughter, waited for someone to put her father's killer behind bars and relieve her grief. And then on August 31st, as Boudrie watched her former stepmother, Judie Hansen, led away in shackles, that became a real thing for her. Chris Ross said he was barely out of law school when Boudrie was killed, but through the years he had heard rumblings about the unsolved case and suspicion that the man's former wife may be to blame. 3 decades. Hansen became a well-known member of the Ada community all of this time. She remarried, obviously. She opened a bridal shop downtown. I don't know what it was called. She did work with several charities, and she gave money. At Christmas, she dressed up as Mrs. Santa Claus and delivered gifts to kids. She was, at the time that she was arrested, she was working as a radio advertising executive at K80A for a local radio station. So, I mean, she was, like, really well known. So, coworkers, friends, and even her second husband rallied behind her during her trial. Many asked the judge for leniency at her sentencing hearing and said that and here's the thing too, she always professed her innocence, like from day one until the minute that they brought back a guilty verdict. But at her sentencing, she said that she thought Boudrie may have been killed by another woman or another woman's jealous husband or boyfriend. She said she would never have hurt him because, quote unquote, she loved him. During her trial, the jury had listened to the wiretapped phone conversations between Hansen and her sister in court. And after about 2.5 hours of deliberation, they went ahead and found her guilty. She was 63 years old when they found her guilty. Found her guilty in first-degree murder in the death of her ex-husband, William Boudrie. The jury recommended Hansen serve life in prison without the possibility of parole. But Hansen was actually sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
You know, trying to work on old homicides I loved it, but it is labor intensive also, and you can't work on just the old ones when you have fresh ones coming. So that's the tough thing. That's the challenge of cold cases too. Is, you know, you can't go off of what you think or what you suspect. You have to have evidence. And it's got to be corroborated and vetted, and it's hard to do that sometimes in cases. It's just not there, or it's not found yet. Even things like Crime Stoppers, those programs are so important to communities because it gives people an avenue to report something if they know something. And people report things for different reasons. It can be because they want to do the right thing. It can be because the relationship has soured and now they don't have any reason to hold on to that information. It can be because it's just chewed them up with guilt. There's a lot of reasons why people don't immediately report, but then later do. If you notice in my foreword, in that rough draft, I put in there, you know, it's my hope as you're reading this book, if you have any information on a violent crime. And I put that in there because it's entirely possible that somebody that has an interest in Ada, say somebody from the Ada area that has information on an unsolved homicide, they may read that book to see what's in there. Hey, that case that I know about, that I've never said anything about, it's listed in here and it's not solved. Maybe I could do something. That's why I put in there that at the last part that you can make a difference.
You've reached the end of our episode. All suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Catch more next time on the Sirens Podcast.